They say that love is simple. But what about when love is accompanied by emotional outbursts, constant fear of rejection, and that feeling of always stepping on toes? Not everyone talks about it, but there is a type of love that is deep, intense, and at the same time, exhausting. A love that borders on chaos. To love someone with borderline personality disorder is to sail through rough seas with your heart in your hands. And nobody taught you how to do that. Have you ever felt as if you were the only one responsible for holding someone else's world together? Have you ever wondered if that impulsive behavior was a form of manipulation or just a misinterpreted cry for help? The truth is that behind emotional instability and toxic relationships, there is a woman who feels everything to the extreme and just wants to be loved without fear of abandonment. But how do you do that without losing yourself? This journey is for those who love too much and sometimes don't know how to survive it. If you've ever thought about giving up and then blamed yourself for it, take a breath, because here you'll understand what few people know, what really goes on inside the borderline mind, and how it's possible to live this love with more clarity, protection, and above all, true emotional healing. Living with someone who feels everything at maximum intensity is no easy task, but it's not impossible either. When we talk about borderline, we're not talking about exaggeration or drama, but a real daily emotional roller coaster that exhausts. A simple delay in replying to a message can trigger a whirlwind of intense emotions, ranging from the deepest love to the most explosive anger in a matter of minutes. This is because emotional instability in this disorder doesn't come with warning. It comes like a wave and takes everything with it. Imagine waking up feeling loved, wanted, safe, and in the middle of the afternoon feeling abandoned, betrayed, or rejected. This is the level of emotional oscillation that many women with BPD experience, and it has a direct impact on their relationships. Their partner may not understand why. A light conversation has turned into a fight, why a compliment has become a reason to cry. They ask themselves, "What did I do?" And the answer is often, nothing. It's just the disorder in action, messing up her emotional perception without any apparent logic. That's why understanding the emotional functioning of those living with borderlines is the first step to avoiding hasty judgments. Instead of labeling them as manipulative or complicated, it's more productive to observe with empathy. I wonder what's behind this reaction. Often, the origin is a deep-seated fear of abandonment, or an old wound that has bled again, even for no visible reason. And when you start to see it this way, your outlook changes, and your heart also begins to understand. And then we come to another crucial point. She can hear, "I'll call you back," and in a matter of seconds, build up a whole plot in her mind. He's moving away, he's tired of me, he's leaving me. The fear of abandonment in those living with borderline is not just a fear. It's almost a prophecy of the end, ready to come true at any moment. This constant panic turns even short silences into cries of rejection, and her brain reacts by trying to stop the pain, even if it often causes even more. It's in this scenario that impulsive behaviors arise. An aggressive message, an accusation out of turn, a sudden breakup, all trying to control what she fears most: abandonment. This isn't malice, it's desperation. And understanding this internal logic changes everything. Instead of seeing it as drama, you begin to understand it as a poorly translated cry for help. For example, if he says, "I'm going out with my friends," she might hear, "You're not enough for me." This is why disproportionate reactions arise unexpectedly. To deal with this, it's essential to communicate clearly and confidently. Say firmly and affectionately, "I'm here, I chose you, and I'm not leaving." Small attitudes like this, said consistently, help to create a less threatening emotional environment. And when the environment is safe, the mind stops projecting abandonment at every step. But of course, to get to that point, there's one thing you absolutely cannot miss. When a man loves someone with borderline, he needs to understand that knowledge is a form of love. When he researches emotional instability, anxious attachment, or dialectical behavior therapy, he is saying, without words, I want to understand what you feel. This transforms the relationship. Because from the moment you understand the intense emotions that drive that woman, everything stops seeming personal and starts being interpreted with empathy. Let's imagine she has an emotional outburst because he was slow to respond. If he's read about impulsive behavior and rejection, he no longer sees just an exaggeration. He sees a pattern of the disorder and knows that it's not a lack of love, but an automatic reaction of the mind trying to protect itself. This changes the way he responds. Instead of fighting back, he can welcome it. And this welcoming can gradually diffuse the chaos. Seeking couples therapy, consuming content from experts on BPD, even watching videos together on toxic relationships and emotional healing. All this strengthens the bond. More than that, it shows the person with BPD that they are not alone. And when they realize that there is someone willing to dive into their world, even when that world seems to be falling apart, something inside them begins to change. And it is precisely in this transformation that a crucial detail lies. When you live with someone who lives between emotional extremes, it's common to feel that every outburst, every sudden silence, or every crisis is a direct attack. But this is one of the biggest emotional pitfalls in relationships with borderline people. The key here is to distinguish between what is the person's behavior and what is an expression of the disorder. Because you see, when they scream, withdraw, or cry desperately, most of the time they are trying to cope with an overwhelming fear of abandonment, not attack the one they love. Imagine an ordinary evening, and out of the blue she says, "You're leaving." It may sound like drama, but for her, the sensation is real, physical, almost suffocating. If the person on the other side understands that this is a manifestation of anxious attachment and emotional instability, they take a deep breath. Instead of arguing, he holds her hand and says, "I'm here." Only this change in attitude, not reacting impulsively, can prevent the relationship from escalating into a destructive conflict. It's like being in an emotional minefield. If you tread calmly, carefully, you get through without anything exploding. Emotional healing in this context begins with those who decide to act with awareness, not reactivity. The very presence of serenity in the midst of chaos is in itself a form of love and transformation. And this transformation is even more powerful when conflicts intensify. You know that storm that no one can hold back? That's more or less how anger manifests itself in someone with borderline personality disorder. The intense emotions take over in a way that even they don't understand. At such times, trying to argue, justify, or confront is like pouring gasoline on the fire. The wisest thing is to walk away with respect, not as punishment, but as mutual care. For example, if she starts shouting, accusing, or making threats in the middle of an argument, the partner can say, "I care about you, but now is not the best time to talk. I'm going out for a while, and I'll come back when we're calmer." This isn't abandonment, it's emotional intelligence. It's a practical way of preventing impulsive behavior and fear of rejection from destroying the bond. This strategic distancing doesn't mean ignoring or running away from the problem, but rather creating space for dialectical behavioral therapy to take effect, even if indirectly. When the emotional dust settles, constructive dialogue becomes possible. But for that to happen, you need to know the right time to speak, and above all, the right time to shut up. Because sometimes a well-placed silence can prevent a relationship from going down the drain. You have to understand an often harsh truth. Emotional healing is not a straight line. It's a journey full of curves, relapses, and small victories that, from the outside, may seem invisible. Expecting an immediate transformation is like planting a seed today and wanting to reap the rewards tomorrow. Real growth takes time and requires patience that doesn't always come easily. A real example? A woman with borderline can start dialectical behavior therapy and, in the first few weeks, seem even worse. This doesn't mean that the treatment isn't working. In fact, it's the opposite. She's getting in touch with deep, old pains that have been buried. This can bring out impulsive behavior or bouts of emotional instability. At this point, it's common for the partner to feel frustrated and think, nothing is changing. But it is, only on the inside. Having realistic expectations means celebrating small advances. If an argument used to last 3 hours and now lasts 30 minutes, that's a milestone. If before she cut all ties after a fight and now just isolates herself for a few hours, that's progress. Every step matters. And understanding this is what separates those who abandon ship at the first storm from those who are really willing to cross the ocean. At first glance, it may sound manipulative when someone with borderline personality disorder threatens to end the relationship, makes a scene over unanswered messages, or suddenly changes their mood. But what looks like an emotional game is actually a silent cry of fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being left alone with her intense emotions. She's not trying to control the other, she's trying to survive the chaos inside her. Imagine a common situation. She finds out that her partner is going out with friends, and even though she's been warned, she panics, accuses him of abandonment, and says things like, "You don't care about me." To those who don't understand, this sounds like emotional blackmail. But for those immersed in anxious attachment, it's the mind trying to protect itself from the impending pain. The problem is that this protection comes in the form of an attack. And that's where many conflicts arise. Responding with empathy is not being complicit. It's seeing the pain behind the impulsive behavior. Saying something like, "I see that you're scared and that makes sense," can diffuse the conflict. Gradually, when she realizes that her pain is welcomed and not punished, she learns with support and dialectical behavioral therapy to regulate these responses. And that's when the connection begins to transform into something deeper. The foundation of any healthy relationship is communication. But with someone experiencing the emotional roller coaster of borderline, this foundation needs to be even more solid. When she feels threatened, poorly chosen words become daggers. That's why it's essential to speak clearly, with an open heart, but without losing firmness. And "I feel insecure when you walk away" is very different from a "you never care about me." In a tense moment, the tendency is to fall into the cycle of accusing and defending, but the secret lies in reversing this logic. Instead of attacking, ask. Instead of assuming, listen. Saying things like, "Can you help me understand what you're feeling right now?" shows that you're not there to win an argument, but to build something together. This attitude disarms defensiveness and opens up space for real dialogue, and she's rarely had that in her life. Communicating well isn't just about talking nicely, it's about knowing when to shut up, when to validate, when to show presence. And, yes, it's tiring at times. But every effort turns into emotional security for someone who, for a long time, only knew instability, rejection, and toxic relationships. And little by little, this constant dialogue becomes a bridge towards emotional healing. Living with this type of disorder is like walking through an emotional minefield. Any false step can seem like a threat. That's why setting healthy boundaries from the outset is not only important, it's vital. They need to know how far they can go without outgrowing what hurts them. Just as you need to recognize how much emotional instability you can handle without writing yourself off. Saying no to a person with anxious attachment can cause fear of abandonment, yes. But you know what's even worse? Saying yes to everything and then resenting it. Boundaries aren't about rejection, they're about protection. For example, if she calls you 10 times in a row during a crisis, you can reply, "I care about you, but right now, I need 30 minutes to breathe and I'll call you back, okay?" This shows presence, but also preserves your emotional space. Toxic relationships often begin when boundaries break down. And in the context of BPD, this can happen quickly, out of impulsiveness, fear, or neediness. So maintaining these boundaries, even in storms, is a way of teaching that love doesn't have to come at the cost of one's own mental health. And yes, that takes strength, but it also reveals a more mature, more whole kind of love. Often, those who live with someone who has this disorder forget about themselves. All the attention goes to the other person's intense emotions, impulsive behavior, the fear of abandonment that seems to consume everything. And then, without realizing it, the partner fades away, no longer listening to them. But a healthy relationship, even with emotional instability, requires balance. And balance starts with self-care. Taking care of your own emotional health isn't selfish, it's survival. Individual therapy is a good way to go, especially approaches such as dialectical behavior therapy, which not only helps those with BPD, but can also offer useful strategies for those on the other side of the bridge. Joining support groups, talking to other women going through the same situation, can bring relief and a new perspective. Because yes, understanding that you're not alone changes everything. You can only truly support someone when you're standing your ground. If your emotional needs are being ignored, the risk of falling ill together is great, and nobody wants that. Loving someone with a fear of abandonment, a history of rejection, and traces of toxic relationships is an act of courage. But it needs to be accompanied by emotional intelligence. And that's where you start to turn the key. After everything you've learned so far, the question that remains is, are you going to keep trying to love without understanding? Or are you ready to transform this relationship with awareness, clarity, and more emotional lightness? The knowledge you've just acquired isn't just about the other person. It's about you too. About your limits, your choices, and the kind of love you want to build from now on. Think with me. How much of your peace have you sacrificed trying to fix someone? What if, instead, you started prioritizing yourself, communicating more, firmly, and recognizing what is yours, and what is the other person's? You can love without canceling yourself out. You can offer support without carrying everything yourself. But it's only when you understand what's behind the impulsive behavior, the anxious attachment, the rejection, and the fear of abandonment, can you break out of the automatic and start to heal? Now tell me, what struck you most about this content? What part made you see something that you hadn't noticed before? Let me know in the comments. I'll read everything. And if this topic made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications. Because in the next videos, I'll continue to show you, with clarity and depth, how to live a love that doesn't destroy, but transforms.